Hi, Kim here at An Oasis of Books. Just going to share with you everything I read January through June of 2025. And then we can start off a fresh new blank slate in July. As you know, if you watch one of my previous videos, I actually took a 6-month break from BookTube and I've just come back. And I didn't read as many books in January through June as perhaps I usually do, but I still read quite a bit, mostly cozy comfort reads, rereads, as it were, for probably 90% of the titles. How do you like my mug? I got this. Let's see if I can show you. Powell's Books. When I visited Powell's Books in Portland, I've been there a few times, and my two youngest, my 19-year-old and 21-year-old, and I went and visited again this past year. And it's just such an awesome experience if you've never been. Powell's is known as the largest independent bookstore, well, either in the country or the world, depends on who you ask, but it takes up a huge city block, multi-stories, and it is just the most fun bookstore. It's full of new and lots of used books too. The rooms are color-coded, which is super, well, colorful and fun, and also makes finding your way around a lot easier. And yeah, I just really enjoyed the store, and one of my daughters gave me this mug, and I'm really enjoying it with my iced coffee today. I hope you have a drink, maybe a snack, as we go over these, it looks like 35 books I read in January through June of this year. So in January, I read 9 books, 2 classics, 3 mysteries, 1 literary fiction, 1 science fiction, and 3 nonfiction. Does that add up? Yes. So of these 9 books, 5 of them I read as ebooks, 4 as physical books, and I'm going to show you all of them now. If it was an ebook, I'll put the cover up here. And what else? Well, I will say a few things about each book, but not too much. We have a lot of books to get through. So first up was Jane Eyre. I am doing a project of sorts with Charlotte Bronte, and so I am rereading some of the books of hers I've read before, like Jane Eyre. I'm reading some of her other titles that I haven't read. I'm going to be reading some biographies, and I even have a tie-in series that's been written recently. That is a mystery series set with Charlotte Bronte as the sleuth. But Jane Eyre, I was a little hesitant to reread it, even though it definitely ranks as one of the very top books I read in my childhood. I loved this book. That's why I was hesitant to reread it. I was a little afraid, as maybe we all sometimes are, to reread a book we haven't read in decades because we're afraid it might not measure up to our memories. But I have to say that Jane Eyre more than measured up. It was absolutely stupendous. So glad I reread it, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of my Charlotte Bronte project the rest of this year. Next up, another reread was Pygmalion. Now, I haven't read this probably in 15 or 20 years, and like Jane Eyre, I was just as pleased with it this time around. You know, I do like the movie My Fair Lady for the most part, but I've never liked the way Higgins bullies Eliza. I've never liked the way he really doesn't treat her with respect at all. It's all about Higgins. But there's 2 things I really appreciate about Pygmalion. One is that Eliza does not take it from Higgins. She doesn't remain cowed, and without giving anything away, the play does not end the way that the movie ends, which I also really appreciate. And yeah, it was great to reread it and be reminded of a very strong character, Eliza, who had a lot of value in and of herself long before Higgins undertook to make her into a lady. We get to see that when we read this. And if you haven't read it before and you've only seen the movie, I highly recommend you read the play. Well, those were the two classics. As far as the three mysteries go, the first one I will tell you about is The Night in Question, a novel by Susan Fletcher. She writes a few different varieties of genres, and I really appreciate all of them, actually, and have several on my TBR. This one is part mystery, part women's fiction. It's all about Florrie, who's 87 years old. She only has one leg, and she is probably the most cheerful, but not fake cheerful, really authentically cheerful, friendly, nice people that I've ever come across in fiction or in life. And as the book goes on, we learn that she had a very, very full life up to this point with many adventures, which you perhaps might not have guessed if you just, came upon her one day in passing. It kind of reminds me, how we all have such complicated, deep stories that most people know nothing about. In any case, Florrie is living currently in a older person's retirement home. She has a community there that she's getting to know, starting to make friends, and an accident happens, which she is not convinced is an accident. And she starts, I wouldn't say snooping, but searching out clues to figure out if this was actually maybe a murder. And in the process, she has to think back on her own life. And we become clear pretty early on that some trauma did happen early in her life. And as we go back with her, thinking through all these different adventures she's had through her very full life, we come closer and closer to discovering what that trauma was. And Florrie, at the end of the book, as the conclusion to the mystery is finally drawn, so too she is able to finally move on from this trauma that occurred so long ago and live out the rest of her life in what seems to be, hopefully, a full and happy manner as the first part of her life. If you haven't read any Susan Fletcher, I'd say give this a try. It's medium pace for the most part, but there are some slow parts. It's a very thoughtful book, which I appreciated. I really enjoyed sitting back and relaxing with this one. Another mystery that I read in January was Homicide in Hardcover by Kate Carlisle. I love Kate Carlisle's writing. This is the first in a long, long series, and I am happy to say just as great the second time around, and I am looking forward to finishing the whole long series. There's a few at the end that I actually have never read, so I can't wait to get there. But the main character in this cozy mystery series is Brooklyn Wainwright. She is a book surgeon, as it were. She repairs old, wonderful classic books. Really, they were works of art, many of them. And she is a specialist trained under one of the best in the business, who was not only her mentor, but her friend. And in the very beginning of this book, that mentor is killed, and Brooklyn has to figure out who did it. Now, as he lies dying, Abraham, her mentor, hands over to Brooklyn the book he has just finished restoring, a copy of Goethe's Faust. And as he gives it to her, he says, "Remember the devil." Kind of cryptic, but Brooklyn sets about solving this mystery. Aiding her is a British security officer that she may or may not fall for. This book is set in San Francisco, which I love. It describes the area really well, so you get a true feel for it. And it takes you back to where Brooklyn grew up, just outside San Francisco, in a hippie commune. And her family, including her quirky parents, are part of the entire series, which I really appreciate. Lots of humor in this series and lots of interesting information about book restoration. So great cozy mysteries that I'm rereading this year as part of my reread for favorite cozy mystery series. Just realized I miscounted. I did not read 3 mysteries in January. I only read 2. So yeah, moving on. How about sci-fi? The sci-fi book I read was by Elizabeth Moon, Remnant Population. Now, I'd never heard of this book before, or the author, and I believe it was Katja who recommended this book. And so I got a used copy, read it, and absolutely loved it. Ophelia is the main character of this book. She is an old woman, some say a crazy old woman. And at the beginning of this book, she and her family and her entire community are working on this planet for some corporation. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I will just say that They were a workforce sent there to populate this planet by Earth. But at this point, they're told they're going to be evacuated, all of them, within 1 month. And the ships start coming, the cryo ships, to send them elsewhere to work for the company, to another planet, to start over again. And although she seems like she's complying on the outside, on the inside, Ophelia has decided she's not going. So she ends up, through her sneaky ways, on the planet alone. Everyone's gone. She's the only one left, and she finally has freedom. And boy, does she enjoy it. It's really fun watching what she does as she comes back to know herself, her own sense of self. But what the book is really about happens after that. Ophelia discovers there is a native, indigenous alien population there on the planet, which they had never discovered before now. This leads to a confrontation between Earth in all of its scientific intelligence and arrogance versus the aliens who see the Earth ships and people as a big threat to them, which they are. And Ophelia knows there's going to be a fight, perhaps to the death of everyone. She needs to step in to negotiate a truce. But can she do that? And if so, how in the world will she? This book is about a lot of things, but it brought me a lot of joy just watching this woman learn she has value and learn she can once again, perhaps even for the first time really, stand on her own 2 feet and be important. So the literary fiction book I read in January was How Much of These Hills is Gold by Pam Zhang. I recently did a video on why I found this book to be a huge disappointment for me. I really didn't like it for a variety of reasons. I did also just this morning private that video, so you won't see it on my channel, because I feel like it accomplished its purpose, which was to sort of warn my subscribers who had seen my previous video back in January where I talked about this book excitedly, really anticipating how great it was going to be. I wanted to counterbalance that and let people know who had seen that video that in reality, once I'd read it, I didn't recommend it at all. And I gave my specific reasons, and so I believe that any of my subscribers who saw that first video and perhaps had noted down the book to perhaps read it at some point have now realized what I actually think of it. Now it's up to them whether they want to read it or not. And if you did not see that video and you've been thinking about reading Pam Zhang's book, How Much of These Hills is Gold, send me a message. You can email me. My email's in the description of this video. And I will send you a private link to that video so you can see what I thought of it. But the second reason I privated it is because it doesn't really reflect what my channel is. It was a review video of one book, which I don't really do usually. And it was negative in the sense that I did not like this book at all. And I never do that. I've never done it before, and I won't ever do it again. It was a special circumstance that led me to doing it this time. And my channel is really about positivity and coziness. It's about sharing the books I love. And I very rarely read a book I don't love because I know what I like. And I know, even when I'm exploring new authors and new genres, I'm pretty clear on, what's going to actually work for me. And on the rare occasion something doesn't, I just DNF it. I don't do a video about it. Again, special circumstances why I did this time, which have now been accomplished, which is why I took that video down. But no, I don't recommend this book at all, personally. Can you tell that I've just turned on a fan? I mean, other than the fact that it's probably blowing my hair around a little, can you hear it? Is the noise overwhelming? I hope not, because I am melting in here, so I really need the fan. Okay, going to try to say maybe a little less about them, but still convey what I thought of them so that I can get through all these books. I've got 3 nonfiction books left to cover for January. The first is Spinster, Making a Life of One's Own, written by Kate Bolick and published in 2015. This book was really interesting. I enjoyed it a lot, and I've since passed it on to one of my daughters. Now, I'm not a spinster, but I'm not married. I was married for 25 years before I divorced, but now I've been single for 14 years, so I guess I am a spinster in a way. Depends on how you define it. This book talks about the different ways that being a spinster has been defined throughout history, and why it was sometimes considered a negative thing and sometimes considered a positive thing. But what the book really does is take you through Kate Bolick's life, or a small segment of it. It is a memoir, where she found herself feeling mentored by people from the past, women, particularly spinster women from the past who she identified with in some real way. And we learn about these 3 very, if not famous, should have been famous women from the past who accomplished great things, had a real significant impact on society, or at least the community directly around them. I don't want to give away anything, but let me just say that it was quite educational, and I really appreciated Kate Bolick's perspective on things. The second nonfiction book I read was Pathogenesis, A History of the World in 8 Plagues. Pathogenesis was written by Jonathan Kennedy and published in 2023. This book is actually more about the history of the world rather than the plagues. And I found that surprising at first, but then it did make sense, and I really enjoyed this book. It's a longer book, a little slow going because it is packed full of so much information. But if you approach it knowing that, you can read it little by little and really learn a lot. Not necessarily that you memorize and keep in your brain forever and ever, but it informs the way you look at the world and the way you read other books, both historical, nonfiction, and fiction. The last nonfiction book I read in January was Leave Only Footprints, My Acadia to Zion Journey by Conor Knighton, published in 2020. And this book was written by a guy who was down on his luck. He'd had some major problems, broken engagement, that type of thing. And he set out on this crazy journey to visit all of the national parks, like it says, from Acadia to Zion. And so he did. And this book is full of very humorous, very unusual, and often heartwarming or inspiring stories that he experienced on his journeys from park to park to park. Highly recommend, especially if you love nature, as well as a good memoir that shows you how someone's life has changed and can never be the same again. Now, in February, I basically didn't read anything except to finish off a book I was already in the middle of, The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. So, The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, A New History of a Lost World, was written by Steve Brusatte and published in 2021. And I really did enjoy this book a lot. I didn't know a lot about the dinosaurs before I read this book. In fact, I knew very, very little, to be honest. And I not only learned so much, but I came away from the book with a whole new perspective on the world, really. Now, I know this topic might sound really dry, even boring to a lot of people, but it was not. And I'm not talking as someone who had any interest in paleontology before, because I didn't. I just found it fascinating. The content and the man's writing style was just so good, so entertaining and accessible. So I'm definitely reading more of his work. Next up will be The Rise and Fall of the Mammal. So yes, I only read one book in February. I can't remember that ever having happened before, but it did. Moving on. Okay, so I just edited this video, and January and February books came to about 20 minutes. I'm thinking 2 shorter videos is a lot better than one hugely long video, right? So I'm going to call this part 1, the January and February books I read. And then coming up almost immediately will be part 2, the books I read in March, April, May, and June. So maybe take a little break or not. You could keep going and watch part 2, what I read March through June 2025. I hope to see you there.